What's good? This is Elton Anderson Jr., and you are listening to the first episode of the Plan B podcast. That's right. Detroit Chopra is no more. We had to let him go. And that was season 1, because season 1 was all about me and my journey. But season 2 is all about you and your journey. So on today's episode, I'm so happy to have one of my closest friends in the world. This is one of my buddies that we met a few years ago, and our relationship and our friendship has just grown and blossomed over the last 2 years, right?
Last 2-3 years.
Last 2-3 years has been really strong. And the thing about my buddy David, his name is David. We'll get into him in a second. But the thing about David is that he's done so much in his life. He is a media guru. He's the godfather of black media. That's what I like to call him. And we're going to get into his journey, his story, and how you can position yourself to be the best you as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to, again, one of my closest friends in the world. David, what's up?
Thank you, man. I'm honored, man, to be on the first, of the Plan B.
Yes.
I love the name, by the way, especially with the spelling plan and BE. I think that's very important.
Yeah, man. I think it just came naturally for me, and that's what I've been doing now. Is I just been following things that come and feel natural.
Yeah.
And speaking of natural, man, you have done a lot of work, like I mentioned earlier, in the space of just media, period. But I think you like black people, right?
I love black people. Black people are my passion in life. And it's interesting because I think, you talk about being and, and be, when I was a child, I didn't like being black, right?
Really?
Yeah, and I think that it was because everything that I seen that was around me that was negative, I associated with being black, right? And, and a lot of my view of the world came through media and the way in which we were perceived. And so, it wasn't until I got older and in my teenage years that I realized that we had been, as Malcolm X said, bamboozled.
Hoodwinked. Led
astray, exactly. that I took the tool that I used, I felt was used against us to help empower us. And that's where my passion around storytelling, around media, that's why it's been so important for me, because I think that you have to be happy with who you are. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the first step for anyone being successful, is being happy with who they are and being authentic to who they are. I was
going to say, it's just being authentic.
Exactly.
And because when you realize it, because, even me growing up, not only as black, but also with the African mother. Mm-hmm. So I was getting African booty scratcher all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I was embarrassed of being African, let alone black, let alone gay. Mm-hmm. It was so many different identities that I couldn't love growing up. And so to see you showcasing, honestly, if we're going to keep it real, black culture is American culture. Like, it is American culture. We shape. If you were to take all the black people out of America's culture, what would America's culture be?
Well, black culture would exist without American culture.
Yes.
But American culture can't exist without black culture, right?
Literally.
And we are the fuel for American culture. America's biggest export is black culture.
Yeah.
And so, when people talk about what we are owed in this country, it's just that, and we continue to be owed a great deal because we continue to create without proper equity in what we're creating. Mm-hmm. Our ideals, our geniuses, our fashion, our beauty, our music, our voices. Our creativity continues to be
our hairstyles, our TikTok dances, everything is being co-opted.
Absolutely. And so I think it's very important that we understand that, and I think it's very important that we have a great deal of pride about what we've created. We just finished celebrating both Juneteenth and July 4th. And I think, both of those dates are moments for us to recognize, what we've built And, you know, as a person who is international like yourself, when you look at, you know, traveling all throughout the Americas, everything that is black, I mean, all the music from the Americas, whether it's samba, reggae, jazz, you name it, is all black music. And so, you know, I'm a big fan of that message and letting people know, young black boys and girls, young black men and women, older black men and women, also understanding just how great we are and that we should all be very proud of who we are, and recognize how great we are by, you know, first looking at all the accomplishments, looking at what we've done in spite of the limitations and the restrictions and the oppression that we've all been under for, you know, the last, you know, 3, 4, 5 centuries. So media was the tool in which I chose for that. And, you know, one of these types of people who I let my passion lead me into these places. A lot of people, a few years ago, I was speaking and someone said, well, you know, how do you develop your brand? I said, well, I don't have a brand. You know, I have a purpose.
Ooh.
And I think that, you know, a lot of, you know, a brand will keep you, you know, on a certain course. You think, oh, this is a part of my brand. A purpose takes you and leads you in all different directions in life, in all different places, right? I would have never dreamt 10 years ago that I'd be living in Brazil, which is where I live. I live in Bahia, Brazil. I would have never dreamt that.
Yeah.
It wasn't on brand, but it was on purpose.
Ooh.
And I think that, you know, it's very important to follow that purpose because it's going to take you into some places that you would not have imagined. And yeah.
David, you already know. So a little bit of personal fact is that, you know, like I said, David mentioned that he lives in Bahia, in Salvador de Bahia, Brazil, which is another one of my most favorite countries in the world. You've been there how many years?
Well, I moved in 2017. I've been going there ever since 2013.
Oh, so you were OG in space. And if you guys have not been, that is a place that needs to definitely be on your radar. And one of the ways that me and David got extremely close was because I was starting this journey to be and to figure out who I was, to figure out that purpose. So it's the same, like just like purpose and brand. I love that you brought that up. It's almost like goal and mission. Like if you have a goal, I've achieved goals time and time again in life. But when I have a mission, a why am I doing this? Why am I doing this podcast? Because I feel like conversations with magical people like yourself will help and has been helping other people that listen to this podcast. So then now they're introduced to you and they're introduced to this conversation. And sometimes our conversations can I feel like our phone calls each could be a podcast, honestly, because they're so deep. Yeah. And David, you know, I kind of attribute David to saving my life as well, because when I was in Brazil, that's when I ended up manifesting malaria and almost died. And so David was so instrumental in.
I had to interpret, and I had to talk to the hospital in Portuguese.
Yes, because I would be there. And David, but even beyond that, even beyond helping me get to the hospital, it was you opening up your home to me for 4 months at the time, and that you will never understand how much those 4 months mean to me. So anyway, enough with the tears.
Very valuable to me as well. So
yes, so that's how the brotherhood formed. So David, let's get to your purpose. What do you think your purpose is?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, I am a big believer in the ancestors. As a matter of fact, you know, I wasn't initially. You know, and it's interesting because I was having this conversation with someone the other day around the fact that we all first have to understand that our lives aren't exclusively our own, right? That, you know, we are born into this world for a purpose, and that we oftentimes are here to fulfill a mission that was started by someone else. And we don't sometimes tap into that and get full consciousness of that until much later in our lives. And, you know, I can remember Now, in hindsight, how it makes so much sense to me, when I was a child, I remember being, on the playground in school, and I remember a voice very clearly saying, "You won't work for anyone because we've worked all our lives for other folks." And and I sort of just stored that, and I sort of put that away.
That voice was loud, and how old were you?
I was young, man. This is like I'm on like, and I wasn't like reading the Alex Haley Roots book. I wasn't.
You
doing
wasn't reading
that.
Think and Grow Rich.
I was I was maybe like 6, 7, 8 years old on a playground in school, and years later, I don't know where it came from, but I got this huge bug to study my ancestry. And, it just came over me. Like, I just needed to know. And, I did that. And I was, by this time that I really got involved in it, I had already graduated. I already graduated from Rowan University, majoring in communications, television, and film. I had already started, I did a short doc at it, won some awards, and was inducted into the Arlington, I'm going to mess it up, Arlington, Virginia. Anyway, some military
like capsule or something.
Yeah, because it was about it was called Hidden Heroes: African American Women in World War II. It was about African American women in World War II. It was a short, but it won some awards.
How many documentaries? Because I thought Finding David Wilson was the.
Well, Meeting David Wilson, that was much later. That was much later.
Okay. It
was a short doc that I did in school, but it was also narrated by one of my mentors, who a TV legend by the name of Gil Noble, who, if you live in the New York area, you might know who he is. But I graduated, went to started working at CBS News, and I just got this bug, and so to learn more about my family's history. So I started doing digging, and I discovered a plantation in North Carolina where my ancestors were enslaved, and I discovered that plantation was owned by a 62-year-old white man who was a direct descendant of my family's former slave owners, and that his name is David Wilson, the same as mine.
Wow.
And so the film Meeting David Wilson was one that was about my journey to find answers to today's racial disparities, and my journey to meet this David Wilson, and not just meeting him and having this discussion, a very tough discussion about reparations and the institution of slavery and how it impacted our separate our families, but also around this journey to find more about myself and my ancestry. And in that journey, I really got connected with the real names and faces of my ancestors who were enslaved, and people who I now recognize drove that decision for me and that passion for me to discover who they were. And
so you invented Ancestry.com, huh? Basically,
I didn't invent Ancestry.
you should have got some money off that, bro. That'd
But I was out there, using that platform like well before it became what it is today. That from that documentary, the documentary I sold to MSNBC. It became like a 3-hour television event, and then that's how I launched the Griot, because we were inside the NBC sort of factory at that point, and I said to the president of NBC News, allow me to take content from all of your local affiliates and aggregate it in one place, and that's how we launched the Griot in 2009. And so I feel blessed because 12 years, the Griot's still around, and there's a lot of great black talent who've come through the Griot. Everyone. I hired Joy Reid, who is now it's the first black woman to have a primetime show on the cable news network.
Wow.
A lot of great talent who are still working in the business, still getting checks. We're still paying the Griot's still paying folks, even though I've sold it. So it's great to have something that's been around for 12 years that people are still, leveraging. But
I was just gonna say, I want to highlight how impactful the Griot was for creating spaces for so many things that we see today, like Blavity and just a lot of the black media, the black center media that we see today.
Well, a lot of folks, there's a lot of folks who, and I don't like to name names because I always feel like I leave people out, but there's a lot of really great talent who've worked with us, who, are going on to be, New York Times bestsellers, people who, like I mentioned, Jory had her own show, folks who CNN correspondents and
it's
CNN.
Lit. The roster is popping.
It's a
like
lot
you
it's
helped
a lot of great
launch
folks.
a lot of those careers.
Yeah, and participated in in many of these careers, and so it's great to be able to look at the black media space and recognize names and faces, who people who have gone on and do amazing things and are continuing to do amazing things, and as a black journalist and someone who believes in the power of storytelling and narratives, to have been able to contribute to so many other people getting to tell the stories that they're passionate about around our community. And so I feel blessed that I was a vessel for that platform. I'm no longer with it, but I left it so that I could pursue, the ability or being able to help out the 118 million Afro-Brazilians to receive, to build media for Afro-Brazilians, to help them to see themselves in a better light, to understand and be proud of who they are. Just like the same sort of adversities that we've had and we continue to face as a community, they have it sometimes, twice or 3 times or even 4 times or 5 times. It's hard.
It's bad.
Yeah. So, that's a part of my purpose, and I really do believe, that I am led by my ancestors.
That, David, it's so powerful. I want to talk more about Brazil, but I do want to talk about this journey to purpose, because I know for me and so many of my listeners, everybody wants to know, what were you listening to? Where was this voice coming from? And I did an episode. I did an episode last week, and my guest, his name is David too. Everybody named David is just lit right now.
He's beloved.
So David McCullough, and basically he was talking about how he was talking about more from a mind and a trauma perspective and a body perspective, and he said that we basically have 16 generations of genes or 20 generations of genes within us, and so it's just like a hard drive. Like, you keep putting data on this hard drive, and that's going to be imprinted in you. So our souls are ultimately passed down.
Absolutely. Well, it's the thing is this. We are, I'm a big believer in genetic memory, which means that, you have a lot of, within you, you have knowledge. Within you, you have experiences. You have triumphs. You have pains. You have sorrows. You have joys. And you have knowledge of, how to overcome, how to face the certain adversities. There's, we have one of the reasons why we're so resilient is that sometimes we unintentionally, as Black people, call on some of these experiences, right? We know that, things will somehow turn out good, right? Because that's what we're tapping into, that sort of knowledge. I'm a big believer that, when you pray to God for something, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and there was something that my mother told me that is still stands with me. She said, God is a God of circumstance. What that means is, God is a God of circumstance. That means that, if you pray for something, you pray for $1 million. It's not going to, you're not going to find a bag.
It's not going to find a bag.
Yeah, it's not going to have a bag full of, $1 million, and it's not just going to appear that way.
Yeah,
that
I would
God
be nervous
actually,
if it did.
Yes, but that God actually works through circumstances in your life, and it only makes sense that if you're praying to God for wisdom, for understanding, that God is the God of circumstance, and that therefore, within your genetic code, you have folks who have experienced almost all sorts of trauma, all sorts of adversities, that when you make those prayers, you tap into that which is already within you, that knowledge that's already within you. And I believe that, you know, we as Black people have to get back to recognizing that we have so much richness in our genetic memory that we don't tap into because, you know, we forfeit it. Now, this is not saying that, you know, you shouldn't pray to God, that you shouldn't call on God. I'm not saying any of that. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true. That this is something that God has given you. That this is all written in your genetic. This is the way He set it up. So when you hear your conscience talking to you, right? When you hear those voices from within you, you got to recognize where that comes from. That comes from experiences. That comes from people who've seen what you're going through and saying, listen to us, even though you may get other sorts of experiences or other sorts of voices from outside of you, sort of giving you sort of counter advice. And so I'm a big believer in genetic memory, not just for, you know, thinking about the things that have passed, but how we navigate our futures.
Yo, that is so crucial, David. And the thing I was thinking about as you were talking were so many things that relate to what I'm going through in the spiritual world, because all this is the same. All of the things that I'm learning in terms of manifestation, that's just realizing that the kingdom of heaven is already within you. And when you think and grow rich or whatever, you're just taking your visions and trusting exactly what to do. And so you were able to build media companies, documentaries, all because you followed your purpose and you followed that voice within you. You didn't look outside of yourself to say, okay, should I do this? And you started off going to school for mass communications, but you were like, you could be a weatherman right now. you would be killing. You could be
next Al Roker.
You could be the next Al Roker, but you decided to listen to your own self and go on your own journey. And I want to really applaud you for that, because going on your own journey is scary. Were you ever scared at any point?
Oh, I'm scared all the time.
Ooh, okay. Let's talk about fear.
Well, fear is a part of living, and if you really want to live, right? There's no living. You know, living. The other part of living is that fear, the uncertainty, right? That's how, you know, why do people get on roller coasters, right? It is for that thrill. It's for that, right? And so that's natural. If you were following a script throughout your entire life and everything went as planned, that's not living, right? You don't learn anything that way, right? You learn in those blind spots, the things that you don't know that you don't know. That's how you learn. And I feel, and so I embrace that. And I'm, you know, I always have a healthy amount of fear. That's what keeps me, that's what wakes me up sometimes. Not, you know, I'm not driven by it, right? But it's the thing that makes me sometimes think about things and make sure that I'm, you know, critical of certain elements in my life and positively. But I think it's important to have that and to understand that that's a part of humanity.
And I think I think in my definition, love is the opposite of fear. So you know, love, when you love something, it has a polarity to it, just like man and woman, yin and yang, whatever you want to call it. And the more you love something, the more you're afraid to lose it, in a sense.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, it's important that, you know, I always say about fear, there are two types of fear. The type of fear that promotes self-preservation, and the type of fear that deters self-improvement. And I'll explain that. If I'm on the top of the Empire State Building, I am rightfully fearful of falling, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's helping me to
Self-preserve.
self-preservation
You
right
staying
there,
alive,
right? Staying
'cause
alive.
The wrong wind come.
Yeah,
It's like, why was your goofy ass up there
exactly.
in the first place?
That's a good
But go
fear.
ahead.
That's good. But then there's also a type of fear that also deters self-improvement, where I don't want to go out and do this. You know,
I don't
you're
want to
afraid
start that podcast.
Exactly.
I don't want to make a documentary.
Exactly.
I don't want to, yeah.
Exactly. And you have to, I think for us, we have to determine which fear is good and which fear is bad.
But that's the problem, because a lot of that is trapped within the ego. So you think that your ego thinks that it's protecting you, because another thing that's genetically encoded into us is to be in the tribe, whatever tribe or whatever community we're in. We're genetically encoded to like want to be in that. So when you do something that could get you excommunicated, whether it's make a fool of yourself or be embarrassed or whatever, so people are naturally scared to do that.
Yeah.
As well too.
But then you realize that if most people are like me, right? And I think that the majority of people are like me.
Like how?
Well, you think about somebody maybe 10 minutes out of the day.
Oh yeah, ain't nobody think about you.
Nobody think about you. And
Ain't nobody thinking about you.
They go on with their own day, right? And so like, am I going to limit my life, my potential, my happiness for 10 minutes of somebody else's thoughts that they might have daily, or might not even be daily, weekly, or even monthly about me, right? Think about it. Everyone has their own things that they're dealing with. Everyone has their own problems. And no one has the capacity to be thinking about you day in and day out. So
unless you like doing stuff like Bill Cosby and
but even Bill Cosby
and R. Kelly.
As big as Bill Cosby, and R. Kelly, and as big as the name is, and big as most people aren't thinking about Bill Cosby day in and day night.
You're right about that.
Day in, day out.
And it doesn't matter. Even
matter.
Whatever people, I always say too, like,
not to equate anything that we would do to Bill Cosby.
No,
or
yeah,
Kelly.
we are not doing this. But I'll say this too: just as much as we can talk about them from that perspective, there's people that literally hate Oprah and Beyonce.
Oh yeah,
like literally, and Obama. They literally hate them, and you can't be deterred by the hate. You have to be deterred. I mean, you have to be reinforced by the love. Yeah, and because your haters love you too. They just don't.
But you know what though? I never. This is one thing in our culture that's really strong, and I think it can be very counterproductive. A lot of people talk about the haters, give more energy to the haters. I'm sure. Do I have haters? I'm sure there's somebody who can't stand me.
Nobody hates you, David.
Well, I'm sure there's people who can't stand. Like, I'm sure my face pops up on somebody's feed, like, I can't stand them, right? I'm sure that exists. I don't know that person. Okay. But I'm sure that that exists, right? But that's not my preoccupation, right? I don't give energy to it, because I do know that there's more people who love me. I do know that there's more people who've had interactions with me that I do my best to make sure it is a positive interaction. And so, I don't think that, I don't give energy to that, because I think just the same amount of energy that you give to that, you can give it to something positive. Right, and I feel like that's how I try to live. You talk about purpose. I think that we all have to recognize and figure out what we're going to do in this time that we have. I'm now 44 years old, and I think that one of the ways in which I've determined what is purposeful in my life is the thing that gives me most joy and most fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And, when I am happy, it's because I'm purposeful. When life is not that it's ever really easy, but when it's fulfilling, it's because I'm purposeful. And a lot of people, I think they can have those moments where they feel that way, but they feel like, because it's not associated with a check, that they're not on the right path. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big believer that when you are a very unique person, you have a very specific role that you are meant to play in this universe. And when you're on purpose, and when you're on your, when you're really pursuing and why you're actually here, that makes you incredibly valuable, because no one else can do what you can do, and then money finds you, because people begin to value you. You're doing something that no one else can do. You come from a perspective that no one else has, right? You have a voice that is, equal to no one else's. And I think that when you step into that, when you step into your purpose, your value goes up, because no one can duplicate you. You look at all the great artists, right? Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, like there's things that they do, right? When Stevie Wonder singing, when he started going, like
it's a bop.
It's right. It's a bop. But think about it that way. Like, who would just, you don't teach that.
Yeah.
With Michael Jackson, all the noises that he makes, no one teaches that.
Nobody
That's
teaches
that authenticity
that.
from him, right?
Authenticity.
And
it's
you can't
Prince with the music. It's
what makes
and
them
people
them.
feel like we feel it.
Yes, because it's something. It's pure.
Yeah.
It's something. It's a reaction that they're having to the music that they're producing, that is their mark on it, right? That you have, in this age where you have a lot of artists who sound alike, right? And the industry says, if you sing this way, this is what people want, and so you have a lot of people following that. But the people who are most valuable are those who have some distinction, that on its face, no music teacher would tell you to make sounds like Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Or to sing in some strange voice like Stevie Wonder, right?
Or be blind and play the piano, period.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing that makes them so valuable. And I think that we forget that sometimes. We want to conform. And I think in this age of social media, there's so much pressure to be like this one, to do this or to do the things that are going to get you those likes, that I think we lose sight on the things that make us purposeful. And I think that we feel like we have to have all those things in order to be successful, and that money is a byproduct of being purposeful.
But that's what I talk. That's why I changed the name of this whole podcast to Plan B, because I think it goes in 3 stages. Like the first plan is the program. They say, this is the program, go to school, get your degree, you do this. Mm-hmm. The next plan is your passion. That's when your heart is triggered. And you're like, oh, okay, I want to be a photographer, or I want to be a dancer, or I want to do something that follows my heart. Mm-hmm. And I think the deepest paradigm is the purpose. Yeah. Because that's when you're listening to your soul. Mm-hmm. So you go from with your mind, which the program has told you to do, then you go to your passion, and then you go to your purpose. Yeah. And this was me starting Plan B, was me literally letting go of Detroit Chopra, because that was a mask. That was an alter ego. That was something that I thought I needed to talk about spiritual things, where I realized that these aren't things that I'm learning. These are things that I'm remembering, because they've been imprinted into my genetics. Mm-hmm. And so I just knew to go to Namibia. I knew to go to India. I knew to come to Brazil. Just like you knew you had to move to Brazil. You just knew it. Mm-hmm. You didn't, you're like, okay, what's the da-da-da-da? Yeah. You just moved. You didn't just move, but after some times going, it felt like home. Yeah. And what the purpose of this and my journey is, I want to feel like home within my own body. Mm-hmm. Because when you feel like home within yourself, then that's when you tap on your soul, and then everything else comes out of you is going to be within your purpose.
And purpose and authenticity go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, and you're continuing those lessons, those ancestral lessons, right? You're building off of those things, and that's why I think it's so important. We as Black people, particularly people who've You know, I always say, and I said this to you too, you know, whenever I meet a friend who is doing something, I always say to them, you know, have you searched, you know, did your genealogy research?
Yeah.
Because there's someone who's driving you. Sometimes there's several people who are driving you. And, you know, for me, I had to find out who. I was like, you know, once I realized that, you know, my great-grandfather was born enslaved and that he learned how to read as an enslaved man, that he was, you know, started several churches in some of the oldest black churches in the states of North Carolina and Virginia, and that he gained his freedom and he ended up buying the plantation that his father was sold to. I realized all those things. It's like, oh, that's him.
That's
That's him and me. That's that's, you know, and for him, he may have had someone else who was continuing that. But, you know, the interesting thing about all of this is that we act on some of these instincts, you know, and without knowing why we're doing these things, not knowing why we're singing, not knowing why we, you know, are dancing, not knowing why we're starting podcasts and starting conversations with folks, and not knowing that, you know, you may have, you know, ancestors who were healers, who were griots, you know, and you realize, oh, okay, I'm doing the things that I was programmed to do.
Yeah.
And we often have the most conflict in life, and we feel like we're going against the grain in life when we're doing things that we're not programmed to do. And that doesn't mean that you don't have any free will, not saying any of that. I think that we can have really full lives. But there are certain things in life that are in our DNA.
Yeah, yeah.
And and just like you know, your height is a part of your DNA. you know, there's some folks who are really tall and they can be basketball players because they have tall height. You know, there's
some folks that are leaders.
There are certain people who are leaders. Explorers, you know, healers.
Creators.
Exactly.
And
musicians, dancers.
It's just in
singers,
you.
Yes.
It's in you. So Dave, I got to take David to the airport in like 5 minutes. So we got to close it up because we will talk forever. But I guess I want to ask before we leave, because we're going to do a part 2. But I want to ask before we leave, how can somebody begin the journey to find their purpose? Because we know that it requires you to break the program. It requires you to find your authenticity. What does that look like? Or what piece of advice would you give somebody who's listening to this and they want to go deeper into their purpose?
So most people, when they say they don't know what their purpose is, it's because they haven't figured out a way to make money off the things that make them happy.
It's always the money in the back of their mind.
It's always, and we always have money as a prerequisite for the things that we need to do and what we want to do. And
which makes sense.
It makes sense, except for the fact that all the things, you know, when I went out and made this documentary, I went the Meeting David Wilson documentary. I went 2 years broke and homeless making that documentary. And I said I would never do that again. I was like, I'm never doing this again. When I launched the Griot, a lot of people don't know, I went another year without making a dime when I launched the Griot. I wasn't getting paid, right?
Wow.
So a full year without receiving a dime when I launched the Griot. Even though we had partnered with NBC, I didn't, you know, we were partners. They didn't own us at the time. So I was doing that in partnership. I didn't get paid a dime. But that was my purpose. And I think that, you know, now, you know, the money, it comes.
Because you got a lot of dimes now, friend. I'm happy for you.
Well, it can always be better. But the money comes. The money comes. And I think we've been programmed, particularly in this culture, this capitalistic culture, to think that, well, I have to find money to make this happen. Okay, well, if you understand you need to eat, and so, you know, you may need to take a side gig or whatever. And then sometimes, here's another thing that we don't like to hear. Sometimes your purpose isn't the thing that's going to make you money. You know, sometimes it's not. right?
Fulfill you.
But if you're on purpose, my mother used to always say this, and this is so true. God will never give you anything without providing increase. God will never provide you a gift without providing increase. Which means, and my mother used to always say this, it means that if God is giving you a gift, he's going to give you everything you need to make sure that gift grows and that you can use that gift, right? So we often think about it backwards when we figure out, okay, I need to find money so I can do this. No, do it. Do it. All right, if you need to take another side job, okay, do that for a while. But you have to feed that gift. You have to feed that. And God will help you with that. But you have to do it in earnest. You have to be committed to it. And you have to do it boldly. So a lot of people, I'm really, like I always say, most people know what their passions are. Most people know what their purpose is. But some people are too afraid to actually admit it because they, if I said I know some folks are like, oh, I want to be president of the United States. I talked to a young kid one day. He's like, oh, I want to be president of the United States. And he didn't want to tell me that. I was like, why didn't you want to tell me that? Because, I thought you would laugh at me. No, I wouldn't. Why would I laugh at you for that? That's, you were worried more about what I thought about your vision because you felt that I thought that you didn't have that potential, right? So you have a lot of people who are actually fearful of claiming what they want to do in fear of other people's judgments.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
And if a 12-year-old girl from Texas would have told you that she wanted to be and dream and be Beyonce, who Beyonce is today, I'm sure there would be a lot of people who wouldn't have believed her.
Yeah.
Right? But you just gotta go and do it. So I'm a big believer that you find your purpose by doing the things that brings you happiness, that brings you fulfillment. And
you know what that is.
Yes, you know what that is. And only you can tell, be honest with yourself about what that is. And then remove the money equation from that, right? The money equation is separate, and you'll figure that out. But I can tell you what makes you attractive to other people is when you're happy. Yeah. What makes you happy is purposefulness and fulfillment. So that comes first. And then, everything else.
You will attract the things that are attracted to you.
Yeah.
You'll find friendships. When you walk in purpose, you'll find friendships that you never would have thought.
Absolutely.
The moment I started my walking in my purpose, me and you became friends 10 times over.
Absolutely.
The moment I said, let me go figure out my purpose, the moment I did that, then I'm able to start this podcast and have conversations with people that are just so enriching that I'm like, this is worth $1 million. Like, I've had $1 million worth of conversations that make me feel like.
And that's the crazy thing, right? Because even if you had $1 million, right, there's a lot of miserable millionaires, right?
Right.
Who are not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And we think that money, provides everything. Yeah, money is really great, but, but when you're not on,
it's not your purpose.
And if you're not purposeful, you're miserable. You're miserable. So, I know a lot of people who have money and miserable. We all do, right? So it's really about the things that make you happy. And I'm trying to tell you, people love seeing, why are people attracted to butterflies? They're beautiful, right? But, but it's the notion of they have this element of this freedom. They're glowing. They're flying free, right? That they, they have this element of this floating to them. And I think that, people just as easily find other folks who are living in that moment, and that freedom, attractive, right?
We can look at social media. Look at the people that are super popular. Whether you look at funny comedian people on social media, people that just dance like Young BBQ or Tabitha Brown or whoever it is. These are people that are being authentic, and
she's happy.
And people are so attracted to authenticity. You can tell it.
You can tell. We know some people, you know, we've had this conversation around some people who, you know, who just aren't happy. And you can tell that they're not happy.
You can see it.
You can see it, and you can feel it.
Yep,
you can feel it. Like, this is a little showy right here.
I'm a double tap, but I
support you, but yeah, that ain't it. But the folks who are really, you know, this world is so void and so of true happiness that when people see it, they sort of flock towards it.
Yeah.
And everyone, and this is another thing that's really important before we go, everyone wants to be a part of a success story. And if you believe in yourself, if you're happy, and if you're moving towards something, you'll find that you have a lot of allies because people want to be a part of a success story. No one wants to say, well, I knew Elton and, you know, I told him he wasn't going to be shit. And so, you know, no one wants to be that. Everyone wants to say, oh, yeah, I remember Elton, and, you know, he slept on my couch, or, you know, I gave him a word, and now look at him, right? Everyone wants to be a part of that. And so when you exude that and when you are your best testimony, then people, you know, will aid you. And, you know, it's just like being at a party and the room is full. You say, you know what, I want to get ready to leave. And you make that announcement, and I'm going to go to the door. I'm going to leave right now. What happens? People don't block you. They say, oh, here you go. Okay, let's move out the way, right? They make way for you. People make way for you. Yeah. If you tell a friend, oh, this is what I want to do. Oh, I know someone who can help you.
Yeah.
Oh, I know someone, you know, and this is one of the keys that I've learned. I've always been really bold. I know that there's a thing in our community about not telling people about not making announcements out with your moves. I've never followed that.
You don't move in silence like lasagna?
No, I actually believe in projecting and telling people where I'm going, because you might, you know the way.
Yep.
And you might offer it. And I know that, you know, I like to hear where my friends are going, because I can say, well, here's something I can help you out with on your journey. And I believe in that type of community and that type of those types of relationships, because that's the only reason why I am where I am now. And the only reason why I will get to where I want to go is because I really have a strong foundation of folks who are around me, who believe in me and who I believe in.
And more importantly, you guys believe in the same thing.
Exactly.
People followed Martin Luther King to that speech because they believed in the things he said.
Exactly.
And if you believe in yourself and you believe in your purpose, then you don't have to worry about anything else, because everything else will be attracted to you.
And greatness is more than dollars.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. King died broke. Malcolm X died broke. There's a lot of wealthy black people in the 1950s and 60s whose names you don't know, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of people who are millionaires, people you don't know. But we have to disassociate purpose with money, right? I think we have to do, that's very important. It's not convenient for people. Money can be a byproduct of it, but money is not a prerequisite for it.
That's it. We're going to end on that note. Do not confuse purpose with money. That is the bar for the show. David, thank you so much. Where can the people find you?
I don't know.
On the streets. David
on the streets.
David
in Salvador Bahia, Brazil. But Instagram, Mr. David A. Wilson. Mr. David A. Wilson on my IG. But I'm everywhere.
He's the man behind so many huge movements and platforms and media companies that you guys, the list will be alarming, and I'll put it in the show notes. But anyway, David, brother, thank you so much. We're going to get you to this airport and back to Brazil. And I love you so much, and I love each and every one of you guys for listening to this podcast. I hope you got something beautiful from it, because I know I did.
It's an honor.
All right, me too, man. All right, peace. Catch you guys on the next episode. And thank you and welcome to Plan B.